There was a house at the end of Willow Street that nobody in the neighborhood talked about. Not because it was abandoned, not because it was dangerous, but because, according to the people who had lived there for decades, the house had never really been empty. Every night, long after the rest of the neighborhood went dark, one of its windows would turn on. Sometimes it stayed lit for a few minutes, sometimes for hours, and sometimes someone could be seen standing behind the glass. The strange part was that the house had been locked for almost 20 years. No electricity, no owner, no tenant. And yet, every few nights, the lights came on. Ethan Parker first heard about the house 3 weeks after moving to the small town of Blackwood, Pennsylvania. He had moved there because he wanted a quieter life, a new job, a cheaper apartment, a fresh start. Blackwood looked like the kind of town where nothing unusual ever happened. Old brick houses lined the streets. People knew their neighbors. Kids rode bicycles until sunset. And after 10 at night, the entire neighborhood became almost completely silent. Ethan liked that. At least, he thought he did. One evening, while sitting inside a small diner near his apartment, Ethan noticed an old man sitting alone at the counter. Ethan had seen him several times before. His name was Walter. They had spoken a few times, so Ethan decided to ask him something. "Hey, Walter, can I ask you something?" The old man looked at him. "Sure." Ethan pulled out his phone and showed him a picture. It was the house at the end of Willow Street. Walter's expression changed immediately. He stared at the photograph for several seconds. Then he slowly pushed Ethan's phone back toward him. "Where did you get that?" "I've been walking around the neighborhood," Ethan said. "I saw the house. It's been empty for years, right?" Walter didn't answer. Ethan smiled. "What happened there?" The old man looked toward the window of the diner. His voice became quieter. "You're new here." "Yeah?" "Then do yourself a favor." Walter turned back toward him. "Don't go near that house after dark." Ethan laughed. "Why?" Walter didn't laugh. "Because people who go there usually come back saying they saw someone inside." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And?" "And the people they saw inside," Walter paused, "weren't supposed to be there." Ethan thought he was joking, but Walter wasn't finished. He leaned closer. "That house belonged to the Mercer family." "Who were they?" "3 people, a husband, a wife, and their son." "What happened to them?" Walter stared down at his coffee. "They disappeared." Ethan waited. "Disappeared how?" 21 years ago." "Did they leave town?" Walter shook his head. "Their cars were still in the driveway. Their clothes were still inside. Food was still sitting on the kitchen table." Ethan's smile disappeared. "So what happened?" "No one knows." The diner suddenly felt quieter. Walter looked directly into Ethan's eyes. "But that's not the strangest part." Ethan waited. 3 days after they disappeared, the police searched the entire house. They found nothing. No bodies? No. No evidence? Nothing. Walter took a slow sip of coffee. But when the police were leaving, he stopped. "What?" Walter looked toward the dark window. They heard footsteps upstairs. Ethan frowned. "Someone was inside?" That was the problem. Walter shook his head. They had already searched upstairs. Ethan stared at him. "So they went back?" "No." "Why not?" Walter's answer came almost as a whisper. "Because the footsteps stopped when they reached the top of the stairs." A long silence followed. Then Walter looked at Ethan again. And that's when one of the officers saw something through the upstairs window. "What?" "A man." Who? Walter swallowed. The officer said it looked like the Mercer boy. Ethan frowned. But he disappeared with his parents. Exactly. Ethan sat there quietly. He didn't know whether to believe the story. Part of him thought Walter was simply repeating an old local legend, but another part of him couldn't stop thinking about that house. That night, Ethan walked home. The streets were almost empty. As he reached his apartment, he looked down Willow Street. The house was barely visible in the darkness. All of its windows were black. Ethan stood there for a few seconds. Then he noticed something. One upstairs window was glowing, a faint yellow light. Ethan froze. He checked the time on his phone. 11:47 p.m. He stared at the window, and then a shadow slowly moved behind the curtain. Ethan couldn't see the person's face, only the outline of a human figure. He took one step closer to the street. The figure stopped. Ethan stopped too. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then the light inside the window suddenly went out. Ethan looked down at his phone for less than a second. When he looked back, the window was completely dark. But there was something else. A second-floor curtain had moved, and written across the dusty glass from the inside were 3 words. Words Ethan could barely make out from the street. I know you. Ethan stood completely still. He had never been inside that house. He had never met the Mercer family, and as far as he knew, nobody in Blackwood even knew who he was. But someone inside that house already did. 6 months had passed since Ethan Parker first saw the light in the old Mercer house. He never told anyone what he had seen that night. Not the strange light, not the shadow behind the upstairs window, and definitely not the 3 words that had appeared on the glass. I know you. For the first few weeks, Ethan tried to convince himself that he had imagined everything. Maybe it was a reflection. Maybe someone had broken into the house. Maybe the words had already been there and he simply hadn't noticed them. But then something strange happened. Nothing. For 6 months, the house remained completely dark. No lights, no movement, no footsteps. Nothing. Eventually, Ethan stopped thinking about it. He focused on work. He made friends. He learned the streets of Blackwood, and life slowly became normal again. Until one cold Friday night in November. Ethan was driving home when he noticed the old Mercer house at the end of Willow Street. He slowed down. Something had changed. One of the upstairs windows was open. Ethan stared at it through his windshield. He had passed that house hundreds of times. That window had always been closed. He parked his car. For a few seconds, he simply sat there. Then he remembered what Walter had told him. Don't go near that house after dark. Ethan looked at the house again. Then he stepped out of the car. The street was completely silent. His shoes made a soft sound against the pavement as he walked toward the property. The closer he got, the colder the air became. He stopped at the bottom of the walkway. The house looked even older than he remembered. The paint had peeled away, the bushes had grown over the path, and the upstairs window was still open. Ethan took another step, then another. He reached the front yard, and that's when he heard it. A faint sound coming from inside the house. 3 slow knocks. Knock. Silence. Knock. Silence. Knock. Ethan froze. He looked toward the front door. Nobody was there. He took out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam moved across the porch. Nothing. Then he heard a woman's voice. Ethan? He turned around. A young woman was standing across the street. She was staring directly at him. Ethan lowered his phone. Yeah? She slowly crossed the street. My name is Claire Morgan. Ethan nodded. Ethan Parker. I know. He smiled awkwardly. Do we know each other? Claire shook her head. No. Then how do you know my name? Claire looked toward the Mercer house. I've seen you before. Ethan frowned. When? She pointed toward the upstairs window. Here. Ethan looked up. The window was dark now. I'm pretty sure I've never seen you before, he said. I don't mean in person. Claire lowered her voice. I've seen you standing outside this house. Ethan stared at her. When? 3 nights ago. That wasn't me. Claire looked confused. You were wearing the same jacket. Ethan looked down at himself. It was a black jacket. Lots of people have black jackets. Claire didn't smile. You were standing exactly where you're standing now. Ethan looked toward the house. Did you see my face? Claire hesitated. Yes. And it was me? Yes. Ethan didn't know what to say. Claire continued. You weren't alone. Ethan turned toward her. What do you mean? There was someone behind you. His expression changed. Who? I don't know. Claire looked at the upstairs window. But I saw a shadow standing directly behind you. Ethan looked back at the house. Nothing. Just darkness. Claire stepped closer. I've been watching this house for almost a year. Why? Because my bedroom window faces it. She pointed toward a house farther down the street. I started noticing strange things. What kind of things? Lights turning on, doors opening, curtains moving, and sometimes, she stopped. Sometimes what? Someone standing in the upstairs window. Ethan remembered the shadow from 6 months ago. Have you ever gone inside? No. Why not? Claire looked at him. Because I'm not stupid. Ethan almost laughed, but then Claire said something that made him stop. The people who lived here disappeared 21 years ago. I know. Claire looked surprised. How? Someone told me. Who? Walter. Claire's face suddenly went pale. Walter? Yeah. She took a step backward. What? Ethan. Her voice became almost a whisper. Walter died 12 years ago. Ethan stared at her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan laughed nervously. That can't be right. I talked to him. When? 6 months ago. Claire shook her head. My mother knew Walter. He died 12 years ago. Ethan's smile disappeared. He looked back toward the Mercer house. The upstairs window was still dark. Then suddenly, a light turned on. Both of them looked up, and behind the curtain stood a person. A tall figure, completely still. Claire grabbed Ethan's arm. Don't move. The figure slowly raised one hand and pointed directly at Ethan. Ethan's breathing stopped. Then the figure moved closer to the glass. For just 1 second, the light revealed its face. Claire gasped because she recognized him. It was Ethan. But Ethan was standing beside her, and the person inside the window was wearing the exact same clothes. Then the light went out. The figure disappeared. Claire slowly turned toward Ethan. Neither of them said a word, because for the first time, Claire realized that whatever was inside the Mercer house had been waiting for Ethan to come back. Claire Morgan couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same thing. That upstairs window, that figure standing behind the curtain, and Ethan Parker standing beside her, while another Ethan was standing inside the house. She had tried to convince herself that it was a trick of the light, a reflection, a coincidence, anything except what her mind was telling her. But there was one problem. She knew what she had seen, and she knew it wasn't a reflection. The next morning, Claire called Ethan. He answered after several rings. "Hello? Ethan, it's me. Claire, we need to talk." There was a pause. "About last night?" "Yes." Claire looked out her bedroom window. The Mercer house was visible in the distance. It looked completely normal in daylight, almost harmless. "I went back through the recordings," she said. "What recordings?" "My security camera." Ethan became quiet. Claire had a small camera facing the street from her bedroom window. She had installed it months earlier because of the strange activity around the Mercer house. "I recorded the house last night," she continued. "And?" "I saw something." "What?" "You." Ethan sighed. "Claire, we already talked about this." "No." Her voice became serious. "I'm not talking about the person we saw in the window." Ethan said nothing. "I'm talking about you." "What about me?" Claire stared at the screen of her laptop. "You weren't standing where I thought you were." Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" "I watched the recording frame by frame." She took a breath. "You were standing next to me." "Yes." "But there's something strange." "What?" Claire looked toward the window. "The camera didn't record you." Silence. Ethan didn't answer. Claire waited. "Ethan?" "I'm here." "Say something." "I don't know what to say." Claire slowly closed the laptop. "Meet me tonight." "Where?" "Not at the house." "Okay." "Meet me at the old church parking lot." They agreed on 8 o'clock. That evening, Claire arrived first. Ethan's car pulled in a few minutes later. He stepped out. Claire watched him carefully. "You're sure you're Ethan?" He gave her a confused look. "What kind of question is that?" "Just answer me." "Yes." Claire nodded. "Okay." They sat inside her car. Claire showed him the recording. At first, it looked normal. The Mercer house, the dark street, Claire standing outside, Ethan beside her. Then she slowed the video down. The screen flickered. Ethan appeared. But something was wrong. His body was visible, but his shadow wasn't. Claire paused the video. "Look." Ethan leaned closer. His face became pale. "That doesn't make sense." "Exactly." Claire continued. "There is another thing." She played the recording again. The moment the figure appeared in the upstairs window, Ethan looked toward the house. But on the recording, he didn't move. Claire turned toward him. "You remember looking at the window?" "Yes." "You didn't." Ethan stared at the screen. "What do you mean?" "You were looking straight ahead." Claire pointed at the video. "But I remember you turning your head." Ethan slowly leaned back. Neither of them spoke. Finally, Claire said, "I think something is copying you."
"You think that thing in the house is pretending to be me?"
"I don't know." Then what do we do? Claire looked toward the Mercer house. We find out who lived there. They spent the next several hours searching old newspaper archives and public records. The Mercer family had disappeared in 2005. Daniel Mercer, his wife Helen, and their 17-year-old son, Evan Mercer. Claire stopped scrolling. Ethan. What? Look at this. She turned the laptop toward him. There was an old newspaper photograph, a picture of the Mercer family. Ethan stared at it. Then his face changed. The boy in the photograph looked almost exactly like him. Same dark hair, same narrow face, same expression. Claire whispered, "Ethan." He didn't answer. She zoomed in. The article said the Mercer family's teenage son had been named Evan, and underneath the photograph was a short description. Evan Mercer was last seen wearing a black jacket. Ethan looked down at his own jacket, the same kind. Claire noticed it too. "Take it off." "What?" "Your jacket." "Why?" "Just take it off." Ethan slowly removed it. Claire looked at the jacket, then at the photograph. Her stomach tightened. This is getting too strange. Ethan stood up. "I'm going home." Claire grabbed his arm. "No! Claire, you can't." "Why?" "Because if something in that house is copying you." She looked toward the dark street. "We don't know what happens when it realizes we're investigating it." Ethan didn't answer. They decided to go back to Claire's house. It was almost midnight when they arrived. Claire went upstairs. Ethan waited downstairs. She walked toward her bedroom window. The Mercer house was visible in the distance. Every window was dark. Claire let out a breath. Maybe it's over. Then Ethan spoke from behind her. "Claire." She turned. "What?" He was standing in the doorway. "Look at the house." Claire looked outside. The upstairs window had turned on. A figure was standing behind the curtain. Claire froze. Ethan stepped beside her. They both stared. Then the figure slowly moved toward the glass. Claire's heart began pounding. The face became visible. It was Ethan, but this time, the figure wasn't looking at them. It was looking directly at Claire. Then it raised one hand and slowly pointed toward the room behind Claire. Claire turned around. Nothing. When she looked back at the window, the figure was gone. Ethan whispered, "What did it want?" Claire didn't answer, because she had just noticed something. The curtain in the window had moved, and beneath the window, someone had written something into the dust. 4 words. "He is not with you." Claire slowly turned toward Ethan. He was standing only a few feet away, but for the first time, she wasn't sure she knew who she was looking at. Claire stared at the words written beneath the window. "He is not with you." She slowly turned around. Ethan was still standing in the doorway. He looked completely normal. Same face, same voice, same black jacket. But Claire couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "Ethan," he looked at her. "What? Where were you 5 minutes ago?" He frowned. "Downstairs." "No." Claire stepped backward. "You weren't downstairs." Ethan's expression changed. "What are you talking about?" "I heard you walking upstairs." "I didn't." Claire stared at him. Then she noticed something. Ethan's shoes were completely dry, but outside, it had been raining for almost an hour. She looked toward the front door, then back at him. "Where did you come from?" Ethan didn't answer.
Instead, he smiled, a small, strange smile. "Claire," his voice suddenly sounded different, lower, colder. "You shouldn't have looked inside that house." Claire's heart stopped. She stepped backward. "Who are you?" The man standing in front of her didn't answer. The lights in the house suddenly went out. Every single light. The room became completely dark. Claire heard footsteps. 1, 2, 3, coming toward her. She ran. She rushed downstairs, grabbed her keys, and ran outside. Rain hit her face as she crossed the street. She didn't stop until she reached the Mercer house. The front door was already open. Claire stood there, breathing heavily. She knew she shouldn't go inside. Every part of her body was telling her to turn around. But she needed answers. She stepped through the doorway. The smell inside was old. Dust, wood, something damp. Her flashlight moved across the hallway. The furniture was covered with white sheets. Pictures hung crookedly on the walls. And on the floor were dozens of photographs. Claire picked one up. It showed the Mercer family, Daniel, Helen, and Evan. She picked up another. It showed the same family. Another. The same. Then Claire found something that made her hands shake. A photograph of Ethan, standing outside the house. The photograph looked old, much older than Ethan could possibly be. On the back was a date, October 17th, 2005. Claire dropped it. No. She picked it up again. Then she heard a voice upstairs. "Claire?" It was Ethan. She looked toward the staircase. "Ethan? Help me." Claire ran upstairs. At the end of the hallway was a locked bedroom door. The voice came from behind it. "Claire, please." She grabbed the handle. It wouldn't move. Then she heard another voice behind her. "Don't open it." Claire slowly turned. The other Ethan was standing at the end of the hallway. But now, he didn't look human. His face was pale. His eyes were completely dark. And his smile was too wide. Claire stepped backward. "You're not Ethan." The thing smiled. "No." "Where is he?" The thing pointed toward the locked door. "Inside." Claire looked at the door, then back at the creature. "What do you want?" The creature's smile disappeared. "I needed someone to remember him." Claire's voice trembled. "Remember who?" "Ethan." The hallway became silent. Claire slowly looked at the door. Then she heard pounding from inside. "Claire!" It was Ethan, his real voice. "Claire, don't listen to it!" The creature suddenly rushed toward her. Claire screamed and ran into the bedroom. The door slammed behind her. Inside the room was Ethan. He was sitting on the floor. His hands were tied with an old rope. His face was exhausted. Claire stared at him. "Oh my God." Ethan looked up. "Claire." She rushed toward him and untied the rope. "How long have you been here?" Ethan looked confused. "I don't know." "Days?" He shook his head. "Months?" "No." "Then how long?" Ethan looked toward the window. "Since the night I first came here."
Claire froze. "What?" "The first night." Ethan's voice shook. "I never left this house." Claire stared at him. "Then who have I been talking to?" Ethan didn't answer, because they both heard footsteps outside the bedroom. Slow footsteps, coming closer.
The door handle moved. Claire grabbed Ethan's hand. The door opened. Nothing was there. The hallway was empty. The lights suddenly came on. And then, the figure was gone. Completely gone. No footsteps, no shadow, nothing. Claire and Ethan ran out of the house. They never looked back. But something was wrong. When they reached the street, Claire suddenly stopped. "Ethan," he turned. "What?" She pointed toward the Mercer house. Every window was dark. The house looked abandoned again, as if nobody had ever lived there. And then Claire noticed something in the upstairs window. A silhouette, standing behind the glass. She grabbed Ethan's arm. "Look!" Ethan looked up. His face went pale. Because the silhouette was him. Claire looked at the man standing beside her, then back at the window. The figure in the window slowly raised its hand and waved. Ethan whispered, "That's not me." The lights went out. The silhouette disappeared. And when Claire looked beside her again, Ethan was gone. She screamed his name, "Ethan!" Nothing. She searched the street, the yard, the house, everywhere. But Ethan was gone. And, strangely, the figure in the window was gone too. The next morning, Claire left Blackwood. She didn't tell anyone what happened. She packed everything she owned and moved to another state. She never went back to Willow Street. Years later, Claire still refused to talk about the Mercer house. But there was one thing she kept: the old photograph she had found inside the house. She kept it locked away. Until one night, while cleaning her apartment, she finally looked at it again. The photograph showed the Mercer family: Daniel, Helen, Evan. But Claire noticed something she hadn't seen before. Behind the family, standing in the hallway, was Ethan. And written on the back of the photograph were 4 words: "One must stay inside." Claire dropped the photograph. Her phone suddenly rang. Unknown number. She answered. There was silence. Then she heard a man's voice, very quietly. "Claire?" She stopped breathing. It was Ethan. "Claire, don't come back." A pause. Then Ethan whispered, "Because I'm not alone anymore." The call ended. Claire never returned to Blackwood. And according to the last person who lived near Willow Street, the Mercer house remained empty. Except for one thing. Every night at exactly 11:47 p.m., a light still turns on in the upstairs window. And sometimes, 2 shadows can be seen standing behind the curtain. One tall, one short, watching the street, waiting for someone new to look back.